We are now joined by a very special guest, Ambassador Atul Keshav. I keep saying this, but I'll say it once again. Somebody who's had a huge role in taking us to the strategic partnership, the level of the relationship which we now enjoy. Thanks, Ambassador, very much for being with us. Not going to let you go easy. I'm going to ask you some fairly tough questions. The first one, and let's have that question plaque up, with Narendra Modi visiting the United States, will America force India to cut down on Russian oil imports?
That's a great first question, Vishnu, Maria. Good to see you. Look, I want to endorse what Nikunj and Sanjeev and Kriti talked about earlier. They spoke very well. Let me start by saying this. If you go back 50 years to when USIBC was founded, it would be unimaginable that an Indian prime minister would be one of the very first visitors to Washington in a new administration, not even a month since the inauguration of the new president. So think about how far we've come. And even 25, 30 years ago, when I started my government career, it would have been unimaginable that India would occupy so much importance in the strategic worldview of the United States, such that the Prime Minister of India would be coming and we would have such a vast and ambitious scale of topics to discuss. So there's obviously been an enormous amount of strategic convergence between Delhi and Washington. We've overcome a lot of our legacy problems, and we are now looking forward to the foot race between us and other great powers for technology suzerainty in the 21st century. Now, to your question, let's see. Let's see what the two leaders decide. Obviously, the number one goal of both leaders is to reestablish their personal relationship with each other in the life of the second Trump administration. As Nikunj said earlier, personal relationships matter a lot in diplomacy and in the relations between states. So this is a very critical early interaction. Everything's going to be on the table, but I think both leaders are essentially going to be driven by one key question. What can we do for our people that helps maximize our prospects for happiness and prosperity in the 21st century? And on issues like Russian oil, I think there's ample possibility for the U.S. and India to come to a very robust agreement on our energy future together. You know, we at USIBC were hosting Minister Hardeep Singh Puri today in Delhi at the India Energy Week. There's so much on oil, gas, nuclear, and renewables that we can talk about that I think this may figure in, and we'll have to see what the two leaders decide.
Okay. Ambassador, my question is about the other T. Besides Donald Trump, it is the other T, which is the tariff here. You know, much before, the Prime Minister arrives there have been series of announcements which have been made, which is being seen as essentially political tools by the current administration. So 25% tariffs on goods from Mexico and Canada, 10% additional tariff on goods entering from China. But as far as India is concerned, all that Donald Trump has said is that India is a tariff king.
Well, look, Maria, the president is known for speaking truthfully and clearly about our friends and partners around the world. And the truth is that India does have very high tariffs. It is probably the country, the large economy with the highest tariffs on earth. And there are a lot of non-tariff barriers as well. We were asked to put together a compilation of all of the hindrances that keep the U.S.-India trading relationship less dynamic than it should be. And one of the issues is tariffs and non-tariff barriers as well, which are considerable. Bureaucratic red tape, bureaucratic hangups in both capitals about how we treat one another. So when the president speaks this way, he's reflecting a great sort of core truth of diplomacy, which is reciprocity. I treat others the way I want to be treated myself. And the United States historically has had the lowest tariffs of any major economy for many, many years. It has benefited our consumers and our nation and our GDP and our growth. And my feeling is that it is time for us to re-examine some of these bases by which our trade relationship is run. We ought to look at what it would take to unleash India's competitive instincts and animal spirits in a way that makes India even more of a global leader. That's going to be good for the United States and good for global security if India can re-examine some of these tariff barriers that, frankly, I think hold back Indian economy and Indian companies from being globally competitive. So Donald Trump is speaking truthfully, as a friend always does, and respectfully, and then we'll see how the two leaders discuss these issues.
So I take it, Ambassador Keshav, that India bringing down tariffs on Harley-Davidson bikes isn't good enough. That's essentially what you're saying, right?
Well, look, that's a token measure. I don't think it has much impact. I mean, surely it'll mean more bikes sold in India, but it doesn't have a really big impact.
Sure.
You know, if we want to be serious, right? If we really want to be serious, our two great democracies have to recognize that we are in a flat out foot race with the Chinese on technology in the 21st century, and that we ought to get actually sober and serious about integrating our highest technology, defense, and software and digital economy and fintech and pharmaceutical capabilities, not only for the strength and security of our people, but to ensure that free societies win this foot race on technology. And that's where token gestures are nice, but they don't actually have a lot of meaning. And I would sincerely hope, Vishnu, that we're going to have ambitious trade talks that really break down some of these barriers and unleash our companies and our economies.
Okay, I wanted to ask you a more substantive question on Iran. Will America force India to reevaluate our ties with Iran? Now, that's important for a couple of reasons, and there are areas of convergence. For example, the Chabahar port is important for India because it is a route into Afghanistan. We share security concerns with America in Afghanistan and in Central Asia. However, America has huge concerns for different reasons, several reasons, with Iran. So while we are strategic allies, we aren't quite allied in terms of our Iran policy. Is that something that might come up?
So I actually see opportunity here, Vishnu. Look, my experience, and I'm not an Iran expert, but from watching very closely over the decades, is that the Iranians, as currently led by the Ayatollahs, are completely unreliable, and they are a massive driving source of instability in the Middle East, particularly in the Gulf. India has 7 million citizens in the Gulf. It has so much historical, cultural, economic ties to the UAE, Saudi Arabia, and other countries in the Gulf. And the Iranians systematically go about trying to subvert those countries and those places in ways that would be to the detriment of India. This Chabahar deal has been going on for 20 years. It hasn't been able to fructify because of Iranian, frankly, double dealing with regard to the terms. So here's where I come out. I think India and the U.S. and Israel and UAE and Saudi Arabia have come together with a marvelous, marvelous concept of the India-Middle East Economic Corridor. That can be the real answer to this Chabahar conundrum, where you create logistics, supply chain, infrastructure corridors leading from Bombay to the Gulf, through the Gulf, into the Mediterranean and into Europe, and you don't need Chabahar anymore, and you don't need to rely on utterly unreliable Iranian ayatollahs who are dealing from the bottom of the deck. President Trump has been extremely clear about his views about the Iranian regime, and I think it's time for us, Delhi and Washington, to figure out ways to work with one another to solve these strategic and supply chain and logistics and access conundrums in a way that's effective.
As a last question to you, and this is with regards to Russian arms imports. Do you think U.S. will force India to cut that down?
Well, I don't think any nation can force any other nation when the nation in question is the size and scale and sophistication of India. And I don't think the American people are in that kind of frame of mind about India. Look, at the end of the day, we are the two largest democracies. We are the two largest free nations on Earth. And we are the nations that have to innovate together and collaborate together to ensure our primacy in the technology and strategic competitions of the 21st century. It's going to be good for Delhi, good for Washington, good for our people, good for the world. So this is where we have to have an honest conversation. There are bureaucratic hangups in my town and in Delhi that preclude us from taking it to the next level on defense relations. We grind at these issues all the time. Sometimes we succeed, like on the drone deal and on the GE engines and so much else. But we have also got to be honest with ourselves that we have reached a plateau. And our bureaucracies need to abandon certain shibboleths if we are to break through that plateau and take it to the next level of interoperability. So this is where we cannot be passive. We have to be active, and we have to have the leaders break through all this bureaucratic clogging of the pipes in order for us to get to things like fighter planes and other apex 21st century defense platforms.
Ambassador Keshav, always wonderful to speak to you. We will speak to you again in the days ahead. It's an important visit.